Hello, welcome to Performance Anxiety. We analyse the film, television, theatre and comedy performances that everybody is talking about. I'm Alex Dale, and with me is my resident film expert,
Maren.
On this episode, we want to talk about the 2022 Netflix production of Lady Chatterley's Lover, directed by Lord of Clermont-Tonnerre and starring Emma Corrin as Constance Chatterley, Jack O'Connell as Oliver Mellors, Matthew Duckett as Clifford Chatterley, and Joelle Richardson as Mrs. Bolton. So why did we want to talk about Lady Chatterley's Lover in particular, and what kind of performance do we want to talk about?
There was a big hoo-ha about Emma Corrin, who I think people know from just playing Lady Diana in season 4 of The Crown. In the interviews leading up to this adaptation, talked about her non-binary status and hoped for the award ceremonies to do away with the gendered categories, which I thought, I've always been for the idea of dissolving the gendered categories of acting. You know, it should be like horse riding, where you don't have a specific male or female categories. So Emma Corrin talks about her non-binary status, and the production itself boasts the employment of Matthew Duckett as Clifford Chatterley, and he does have cerebral palsy.
So the important thing here is that, of course, Clifford Chatterley in the book is paralysed from the waist down, and that's very, very important for the story in general because of the sexual relations between him and his wife, Constance.
Yeah, so basically, because his penis been shot to bits, he can't have sex with his wife. That's the story of the book, right?
Does it ever actually explicitly say his penis has been shot to bits?
Indirectly, yes, but that's sort of what it is. The production was very proud of hiring a disabled actor to play a disabled person, and we have already been talking about the idea that it's very fashionable to hire the person who has been through the experience of the character in real life as a guarantee for, verisimilitude or the correct portrayal of something.
So what we're interested in here is identitarian casting again, up to a point.
Up to a point. I think my question, or our question, is what does Emma Corrin's proclamation of her non-binary status mean for the performances that she gives as primarily very female ladies, Lady Diana Spencer and now Lady Chatterley. Why does the identitarian casting not apply to her where it applies to the character of Clifford Chatterley? How does the identitarian casting give him more verisimilitude, and it doesn't matter for her? Shouldn't she be restricted to non-binary characters?
I suppose one of the questions that we have to wrangle with is, what does it mean to be non-binary? Can you not be a lady? Or does being non-binary include lady in its attributes? I don't know.
The problem with the concepts of non-binary and queerness is that it veils always its own interrogation, because it is all about subjectivity. Mm-hmm. And as soon as you interrogate these concepts, they fall apart. So they live solely on the fact that it's about self-identification. I feel this way, I feel this way. I don't feel like a man, I don't feel like a woman, I feel something in between. It has no objective quality to it, so there is already a problem in discussing this. So how do we create meaning around this if nobody can grasp what is actually being talked about? Because in its own terms, it resists definition.
It's interesting that it resists definition, particularly in a story like this that is so explicitly about relationships between men and women, which are very explicitly defined categories.
In the novel, it is a relationship between men and women that D.H. Lawrence sees as the way out of the post-war years.
So it's worth thinking about that, I think. So one of the striking things about the original D.H. Lawrence book was that it was written in the 20s after the First World War, a period essentially of immense turmoil. It was the end of the empire. The First World War had ruptured history in a way that nothing else had ever done and could ever do, and basically cast the whole world into turmoil. The ruling elite, they were decaying. No one believed in things anymore. So there are, in some ways, parallels to today. It could have been an interesting endeavour to remake Lady Chatterley today in the light of contemporary politics around uncertainty, decay, confusion.
D.H. Lawrence wrote a novel that was set in this world of turmoil, and he saw a way out of the collapsing and decadent bourgeoisie and aristocracy in the kind of merging of the sexes through the characters of Chatterley and Mellors.
Famously, it's as much about interclass, I don't know, mixing or merging or dissolving as it is about the sex. And the sex is almost secondary to the class dissolving, Aufhebung, transcendence.
It's a book about class, definitely.
Yeah.
You know, which is very interesting. Coming now to the new adaptation of Lady Chatterley's Lover, which I thought could be very interesting if it picks up the historical moment that we're in. Maybe it does. Maybe it talks about kind of female empowerment in an age where Roe versus Wade is in question. You know, maybe that's how we can connect it to modern life. But
no, it doesn't. It's a very much Catherine Cookson Hallmark card production of Lady Chatterley's Lover.
Yes,
it's like Bridgerton or something, right?
Well, it's not even as funny as Bridgerton. You know, Bridgerton at least is. It's nicely tacky, which can be quite good quality.
Yeah, I've never watched it.
But what Lady Chatterley is the worst of all kind of costume dramas.
You mean this production?
This production, Lady Chatterley's, is basically just a costume drama with nothing to say.
Well, I think what's interesting about it, insofar as it's a very tacky production, it's plainly striving for period verisimilitude. So it's a realist production. The props are chronologically accurate. The costumes are. The casting is realist casting. The directing is all invisible. There's nothing special or spectacular about it. It looks a bit blue. It looks cold. There's a blue filter, period filter over everything.
It's the blue filter of historical past.
It's not sepia tinted, it's blue tinted.
What we would expect from historical drama, it is not warm. The past was apparently a cool place to live. I don't know.
You mean cold, I think, not cool.
Yes. They didn't have central
It's not
heating.
hip.
No. And so this whole film is done in this realist aesthetic. There's nothing that takes you out of the 1920s. So the whole camera setup was just about looking in this kind of very neutral way at the love story evolving between Lady Chatterley and Oliver Mellors, the gamekeeper. And anything that was in the way of this love story has been cut.
Anything in the source material, you mean?
Yeah, anything that would turn us off their love for one another.
So, for instance, in the original source novel, Oliver Mellors is married.
Yes.
And there's no reference to his wife at all in this production.
No, so
he has a dog instead. And he reads James Joyce. I mean, Jesus.
They've modernized him. So they've taken a kind of the roughness away from it. Yeah. He's still got a Derbyshire accent, but that's about it in terms of roughness. But also what they have cut is the crude language with which they would communicate and which they would have to overcome to get to one another. So what we have here is a very boring adaptation of Lady Chatterley's Lover. We both thought it was quite boring. We had high hopes because there is a kind of moment in history that maybe the book picks up on. But it doesn't. It becomes a very stylistically boring exercise in the telling of Lady Chatterley falling in love with Oliver Mellors, and that's it. And you're not really interested in them, and you don't care for them. And I thought, why is that?
So let's think about that then. We're getting to the heart of the matter now, which is her performance. I guess his performance to a degree because they're related, and her acting within that performance. So let's not lose sight of the fact performances are assembled. They're an assemblage of all kinds of things. But we need to talk about her acting as well within that performance and what her non-binary status outside of this production, you know, her symbolic nature as an actress, what that does to it, if anything, what does that mean? So let's talk specifically about those performances. I think the sex scenes are a good way of talking about their performance.
If I was going to be mean about this production, I think it was an excuse to make a film about sex scenes in a way that would be acceptable for a contemporary audience. It's an excuse for Netflix to produce something saucy, but it's also worthy at the same time.
It's funny because in the hype around it, they said this is the sexiest production ever.
Yeah.
But to me, it's also the most kind of neutered, essentially, weirdly.
It's very unsexy.
Yeah.
So although they show quite a lot of sex and
they don't shy away from the nudity either.
Not shy away from the nudity or the lustfulness of it. But the camera, in its desire not to be exploitative shows everything from a kind of distance. Yeah, so you're an onlooker, but without a kind of exploitative gaze onto the sex that's happening. That also means that you are not very engaged in it, because watching people having sex is actually not very sexy.
It's bizarre a lot of
It's
the time.
bizarrely non-sexy.
Yeah.
And it just feels weird. It's not voyeuristic in any way. It doesn't do that.
I think, once again, it's the difference between the interior and the exterior life. So sex is that intersubjectivity that is very hard to show. I think that's what Picasso painted very well, because he distorts people. That's one way of doing it.
Yeah.
But to show on film is incredibly difficult.
Yeah, and this is why it traditionally is shown in close-ups and quite of exploitative gazes, because you need to feel passionate about this, what's happening on screen, and you need to feel passionate about either the man or the woman or body parts. You need to fetishize something.
Mm-hmm.
So watching sex scenes, although they might be exploitative, will then make you either care for this or it makes sense in the story. But the way it is done in Lady Chatterley's Lover, it is raunchy, but it is not exploitative in a good way. Yeah. So there's nothing from the kind of raunchiness that is felt by the two, or should have been felt by the two characters, coming through to the audience. So, and here is where the kind of filmic decisions of camera and blue filters, it looks always very cold, so it's never any...
I have to say, that was
warm.
my big takeaway from watching them go at it, was they must have been very cold and very damp.
Yeah, just put
And not in a good
filter
way.
on.
It did not look inviting.
Put your socks on. So what we have here is the coming together of this cold camera, let's put it this way, the cold camera work, this cold directorial decision to show.
Lots of mid shots.
There's
no close-ups of
There's no real close-ups of faces or body parts.
Mm-hmm.
So only sort of segments, but they're shown, as you say, in mid shot. They're not showing in a way that you experience the body part.
What I thought was, or what I observed, was that the way that the sexiness was being communicated was in a very kind of stylistic choreography, if you like. They used the vocabulary of a bodice ripper, like, this is the moment when the underwear comes off, this is the moment when they lie down, etc.
It is.
So you can see beat by beat, for want of a better expression.
It does look really over-rehearsed.
Yeah.
And it is, because you can see that they have used a movement coordinator to do the intimacy scenes. And bizarrely, instead of making it look elegant, it makes it look really boring.
It makes it look really over-rehearsed, yeah.
It's over-rehearsed. But then comes in the performance of Emma Corrin, who is a kind of stiff person.
Her archetype that you put to me is like a Keira Knightley-esque kind of performer, right?
Keira, but a bit more able, but less beautiful.
Able in the sense of emotive, perhaps.
Yeah, so there's a bit more happening behind the eyes than Keira Knightley,
Mm-hmm.
but she is not pretty enough to be.
She's not as symmetrical.
Yeah, well. But on the other hand, she will hit her mark. She is a professional.
Mm-hmm.
But her archetype is a stiff person. She seems quite stiff and insecure and very good at portraying aristocracy. People who have got stiff upper lips and are quite stunted, repressed.
Yeah.
So I think this is why she was a great Lady Diana. Was a kind
nice
of
but dim,
nice
and
but dim,
repressed.
and
The qualities of being dim and nice and repressed worked for her performance in The Crown. Do you think it added anything or brought anything, or what did it do for the performance in Lady Chatterley's Lover?
It's interesting, isn't it? These absolute very qualities made her performance in The Crown absolutely fantastic. Yeah.
You think fantastic?
Oh, well, it made her Diana more truthful than more realistic presentation of Diana. So the Crown is, from what I've seen, I've not seen all of The Crown, but from what I've seen, it lives from these absolute tacky over-exaggerations, which are a greater truth than a kind of more historically accurate Crown would be. So it works very well because it is over the top and it is a caricature.
It's anvilicious, as they would say. It's like just dropping, it just leaves no room for ambiguity.
Absolutely not. It's a caricature of Lady Diana, so it's far more truthful than any verisimilitudinous utter portrayal of
Nice.
Lady Diana.
As an aside to our listener, we've been tripping over that word all the way through this recording.
But now we have a very realist adaptation of a novel. Lady Chatterley's lover doesn't do this kind of performance. It feels flat.
It doesn't use these qualities in the same way.
No, because it's not called for. It's not an exaggeration. It's a very, very, very sober, straightforward.
Realist.
There's no room for levity in this whole thing.
So it's not like there's no possibility within this production for characters to have an inner life through performance. I think Clifford Chatterley has some to a degree. He's kind of interesting to watch. I think the character of Mrs. Flint, who's one of a relatively minor character, she pops up, suddenly has some interesting dynamics. She has this little baby. She's just interesting to watch, and I think she brings some subjectivity to this thing. And it's much more about the way that the performances of the two leads are molded into one another that is somehow, in the way that we've been describing, uninvolving or uninteresting, deliberately so as a choice, I think. It kind of keeps you out.
It does keep you out because it doesn't want to be exploitative.
Yeah.
And it's a big mistake.
It has to be in some way
yeah.
exploitative, or it has to have some risk or danger to it.
Exactly. But if you have your love scenes coordinated by an intimacy coach or choreographer, there is a big risk of losing spontaneity and literal danger.
The last thing then that we need to think about is specifically what we asked at the beginning of this, which is what does the non-binary nature of Emma Corrin's persona, her acting persona, bring to this production, if anything?
I don't think we can answer that question because the concept of non-binary is so subjective that we cannot actually do anything with this. So it doesn't actually influence her role in any way. The way she plays her character. So she plays it the same way she plays Lady Diana. There is no room for any kind of identity to take over any of these moments.
It's like watching any other actor, basically. Like, their inner life is basically, we'll never know. It's like any human being. We never know actually what's going on. We can only judge it by the evidence that we're given to us, which is the performance at the end.
That said, what is very interesting is that it does not matter that she's binary or non-binary for her role. What is now interesting, because it does not matter that she's non-binary, is why should it now matter that the other roles are played by the kind of correct identities?
So in particular, you're thinking of Clifford Chatterley here.
Yeah, who the production was very proud of casting a disabled actor to play a disabled character. But I think this is a discussion that we will pick up on again and again, the kind of contradictory nature of identity casting, and that it makes, in most cases, absolutely no sense for anybody. So the question now remains, what does the non-binary status mean for Emma Corrin as a character, as a persona? And here it means quite a lot, because what a non-binary status brings to a production that employs her is a tick box that is now needed for certain categories. So you need to employ certain people from certain backgrounds to get recognition or funding and so on and so on. And so her value as an actress is that, if I bring to your production this, my identity, which will assure you to tick the right boxes for, awards or funding and recognition.
So it's like saying no animals were harmed in this production. Also, one of our actors is non-binary.
Yeah, but even more, there is a kind of financial gain for a production if they would employ her.
So what her non-binary status is doing is adding marketability to her persona, Emma Corrin as a character.
Oh, well, it is a kind of necessary or a clever marketing ploy.
The question, I guess, whether it's cynical or sincere is
matter.
moot.
It doesn't matter. I'm sure she completely believes the non-binary stuff about
it. Can
her.
only help, right?
The more she believes it, the better it is.
The easier it is to sell.
Yeah, don't forget, it already gives meaning to her next project because she plays Orlando in the West End at the moment.
I didn't know that.
Yes,
okay.
Of course, which is another adaptation of a modernist book.
which
right?
is Virginia Woolf, I
Virginia
believe.
Woolf, exactly. What is
Is that
very
why she
interesting?
drowned herself?
What is more interesting is just the casting of it. I don't think she needs to be a very good actress to portray this. She just needs to be even on stage. You just need to be an adequate actor,
Which she is.
Yeah, she is perfectly capable.
Well trained, etc.
Yeah, she can hit her mark, absolutely.
Remembers the lines, doesn't bump into furniture.
She knows where the light is, right? And then she just needs to stand there, and that's it. And it's enough. And I don't begrudge her that. And I don't begrudge that this is how you can make theatre, and that's how you create meaning. It's kind of nice in the sense that you can just be and create meaning.
Thank you for listening to Performance Anxiety. Tune in next time for more discussions about the performances that everybody's talking about. Till next time.